Today I'm going to share with you 7 simple steps to write a rage letter so you can let go of that anger and resentment and get your life back. Step number 1 is pretty simple. Acknowledge the hurt. When you start writing the rage letter, the key is don't spend so much time on the details of what happened, like it was Saturday, it was 12 o'clock, and that part of the story isn't so important. What really matters are your feelings. Use as many like you have full permission, swear as much as you want, be as judgmental as you want, just let it go. Release everything. We all experience times in our life where we feel like the victim. And part of the process to getting into truth and reality, getting rid of rage and resentment, is we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that pain and hurt. And the best way to do that, in my experience, is use a ton of judgments, blame, like really blame them and really judge them and really swear at them. Get all of it out, okay? So don't hold back. Be as descriptive as possible with all of those feelings. And again, stay away from, the details of the story and make it heavy on blame, judgment, and swearing, all right? So get the emotion out. The second step to this process is looking back at your childhood. Once you've laid all that judgment out, all that blame out, all of those swear words, look at them and go, okay, how do these feelings, how do these judgments, how does all of this blame resemble life situations I experienced as a child? What you're going to find is there's quite a few. There will be some that are almost the exact replica of what you went through as a child. Some it's going to be maybe more metaphorical or indirect, but there will always be a tie-in. This is not your first rodeo. This is not your first experience of feeling these exact same feelings, having the exact same blame and judgment. You have been through this before. So look back and make a list of all the memories you can come up with, all right? Now, in part, what you're doing is you're discovering your worst day cycle. I say this, we're all caught in our worst day cycle. We've been through all these situations before. We're just repeating them. So that's part of what we're discovering is how all of this is just replaying the pain from the past, all right? Step number 3. Find the adapted wounded child beliefs. Remember, if you've watched my previous videos, because all of us were raised by perfectly imperfect parents, all of us experienced injuries and trauma in childhood. Therefore, we all had to drop our authentic self and develop a false persona. It's called the wounded child, which then turns into the adapted wounded child. That's the false persona. Now, this was a survival mechanism. This is all part of the worst day cycle and codependence, kind of the main things I always talk about. We're all codependent. We're all caught in the worst day cycle. And that's because we were all wounded as children. We all developed a false self. We put in this coping mechanism to survive it. Not because parents are bad people. It's just we've never taught emotions. And so this is what we all have done to survive what we've been through. And so we created beliefs about our parents, about ourselves, and about the world to survive those situations. And so you're going to look at those past memories, you're going to look at the current ones, and you're going to see how do they relate directly? Is there a direct correlation? Is it indirect, or is it metaphorical? But they are going to tie in one of those 3 ways, or 2 out of 3, or all 3 ways. They will mirror that, okay? And a perfect example of this is a client of mine, and this is what spurred this video, is she was recalling memories of when she was pregnant. And, her husband was doing the best he could. He was less than perfect. And while he was very caring in that he wanted her and his, their newborn child to be as healthy as possible, he didn't realize that his own traumatic childhood made him obsessive, and he put a lot of pressure on her to be a perfect mother. And that, breast milk is the only thing, you can't feed a child formula, he got obsessive. And he put a lot of pressure on her. And so she, is left with all this rage and resentment years later at how demanding her husband was, and how for her, it placed this expectation of perfectionism on her. Well, as we were working through this, the exact same perfectionism was placed on her. And this is where she developed a belief system. What she realized as a child was the exact same pressure was placed on her, and the messaging, the indirect messaging was, don't hurt other people. Be nice. And that was the adapted wounded child she created. Therefore, she couldn't stand up to her husband because she had to follow the rules and be nice. See, this is the false persona. And this is for many people. I'm nice, and I can't do that. I could never sit down. That's so rude. These are all these adaptations, all these beliefs that were placed into us, that they were either placed into us or we adapted and adopted so we could survive the situation. We made an estimation of our family and our parents and went, okay, the best way to manipulate this environment, and yes, it is a manipulation, where we all manipulate, all of us as kids, that's what we're doing. We're going, okay, mom and dad, brother, sister, everyone does this, so everyone's dysfunctional, everyone's imperfect, so how am I going to manipulate everybody so I'm safe? It's true. It's what we all do. We all create manipulations to survive. It doesn't make us bad. It's just truth. And so she became manipulative. I will be the uber nice person that doesn't hurt others. That's what she was trained to do as a child. All right, so to learn more about how all of this gets created, the wounded child and the adapted wounded child, go watch my video that I've done recently. It's called The Wounded Inner Child, and it'll walk you through that, and you'll be able to, from that, be able to discover the manipulations and things you developed, not because you're a bad person, but this is just life. It's what we all do, all right? But this, without knowing this information, without doing this work, we get stuck living a life that works against us, not for us. And that's why it's valuable to do all of this, all right? So let's move to stage 4. Now that we're in reality of, wow, a lot of my anger in this moment is actually anger and resentment from the past, and how mom and dad either directly, indirectly, or metaphorically taught me to create this adapted wounded child, this false persona to survive the event. So wow, I'm angry at my spouse who put a lot of demands on me on the way I was breastfeeding and the type of mother I was. But the truth is, I got trained by mom and dad to pick a spouse who would place that on me. Wow. So now I need to write a rage letter at my caregivers, brothers, sisters, whoever played this part, that taught me to lose my authentic self and develop this role, so I'd then pick a partner where I could relive it with them. I have anger and resentment at them. Now this is going to be the tough part for a lot of you, because our society says, honor mom and dad, can't do that, all right? It puts you in a loyalty bind. It's really a trauma bond, and this is part of the worst day cycle, that we don't want to confront that, because do you see, we developed these personalities, these adapted wounded child personas to get connection with mom and dad. And so I'm challenging that. I'm going, do you realize you're not who you think you are? Your beliefs about yourself, they're not yours. They're not authentic. They're just what you took to manipulate an environment to survive. And now I'm pulling that away, and that there's a tremendous hurt to that. It feels like I'm assaulting you and saying you're bad, and you need to change who you are. And in a sense, I am saying that, because it's not actually you, but that feels like I'm assaulting you. And that's just like you were assaulted by your parents, who went indirectly, wasn't their intent, but they said, you've got to be nice. Or you don't fit in this family. In a way, I look like mom and dad doing the same thing to you right now. And then subconsciously you're going, but wait a minute, Kenny, if I give this up, I became all this so I could fit into the family system and I could get whatever love and care was possible in the family, and now you're taking that from me. Wow, you're asking a lot of me, Kenny. That's how the worst day cycle works. And this is what keeps us trapped in those old false beliefs. And we will pick partners and we replay this over and over and over. And we keep thinking they're the problem. Never. It all goes back to how we are stuck in these old beliefs, and that we have to now acknowledge that and recognize while mom and dad adored us and loved us, they were perfectly imperfect, and those imperfections left scars and wounds and injuries that we haven't healed, that mom and dad never healed because society and their parents never taught them to heal it, and so they just passed it on down to us. And now we are carrying it for them, but it's no longer our job. Just as this client, she had to be nice. Well, that's what her mother's, was filled, still is alive, and filled with this. Always has to be nice. Can't ever say anything disparagingly. While she trained her daughter to carry that same shame and pain. That's what all of us are stuck in. So that's why we write the rage letter, to give it all back and get into reality of where we learned this, that it's been placed into us. Now we start flipping things. We start getting set free, because do you see, up to this point, it's all been everything's been done to us by what we think has been done to us. All right, by our parents, by our partner, all of this. We're all powerless up to this point. That's why we're filled with so much rage and resentment, is we are completely out of control. All of that stuff has happened to us. The societal dynamic, the parenting dynamic has left us powerless. Now we switch over to regaining our authentic power. And how do we do that? We get into reality by taking ownership. And what that requires is confronting our denial. And to do that, we have to list all the different ways we could have said or done something differently. Like my client. She didn't have to follow what her husband was demanding. And this is what trips people up. They're like, but I had no choice. We always have a choice. I can tell you, in these dynamics, we definitely have a choice. We could have done differently. And we chose not to. But not because we're a bad person. But because, again, we don't have emotional mastery. We haven't, as a society, taught these things. So we're just doing the best we can. But to be able to get set free, we have to get into reality and get out of denial and take ownership and feel the weight of truth. Gosh, I don't want to admit, I really like it when they're to blame, Kenny. I really like it when I can judge them, Kenny. I really like it when I'm the victim, because do you see what playing the victim gives me? I don't have to be responsible for my side. I get to stay the child. And maybe as the child, you'll eventually love me and give me the things mom and dad didn't, because mom and dad said I couldn't be me. I had to be nice. Do you see? That's why we don't like this step. All the people who get frustrated at me, who think I'm victim blaming or don't want to do this step, it's because ultimately they want to stay the child. They do not want to take responsibility for their life. And in many cases, I don't blame them. They're really so hurt. They still want mom and dad to come back and do the job that mom and dad didn't do. And they're hoping. They're in a childlike state. They're begging, really pleading subconsciously that somehow, miraculously, somebody can come be the mother and father they never had. Well, it's not possible. It is now our job. And we do that by taking ownership, dropping out of denial, and we list all the different ways. Now, this isn't to blame ourselves, but it's to get into awareness that we always have choices. And we need to start acting on those and get out from being a child who has no choice and recognize we're an adult with choices. And when we choose not to act on those choices, no one made us do that. We are responsible for that. Okay? Now, To understand more deeply how that denial, projection, and lack of ability to accept our truth comes into play, go to my YouTube channel and watch its video number 5. I did a 5-part series that's called Reclaim Your Authentic Self by Becoming Trauma Informed. Watch video number 5. Step 5. That's all about how denial and self-deception works. And that's what we're caught in here. This piece of the rage letter. We're now going to take responsibility, because this is, when you become an expert in how we are all masters at denial and self-deception and keeping ourselves the child and not responsible for our lives, when you conquer that, you'll see that's when you're really free. Okay? Now that you're in reality, that you are willing to face your denial and the part you could play, now we do step 6. Write a love letter to yourself. This is critically important, because I know in the previous step you're like, oh, I don't want to admit it, but this is where you let yourself off the hook. And you deserve to be let off the hook, because no one taught you this. You did the best you could with where you were at the time. As you know more, you can do more, or as you know better, you can do better. That was the best you could do. Even if in the back of your mind you're like, oh, I could have done this, the fact that you didn't take that step means in that moment you were still doing the best you could. Because when we take steps, it's because we're capable of it. But think of every decision you make in life, or anything you do that's new. You think about it many, many times before you actually do it. That's part of the change process, is to know what we need to do and contemplate it for a while before we actually do it. And so don't beat yourself up that you were just in that process and never could get past it. Sometimes it takes a long time to take that step, and that's okay. And that's why it's critical you let yourself off the hook, because ultimately the reason you're stuck in rage and resentment towards them is, 1, you're in denial about the part you played, and 2, you haven't forgiven yourself for the part you played. And that's why this step is so critical. We have to get out of the victim mode of blaming them, the judgment and all. Like, it's true, all of that hurt, and that's why we acknowledge it. But then, to get completely free of this anger and resentment, it has to grow. Growth is, change is growth. And so we have to grow into, wow, I did play a part in this. I'm not to blame. I'm not bad or defective. I'm perfectly imperfect, and I did the best I could. And I'm going to acknowledge that. And know what, do you see what that now opens up to? Both of us. All of us. Mom and dad. My spouse, me. We're all perfectly imperfect. We are all worthy of grace and forgiveness. Do you see? How can I be angry at you when I recognize in me, ooh, now that I see it, I could have said no about the boy I breastfed. I could have said, I hear that it's important to you, but look, dude, you're not the one living this. Like, you don't get assaulted 8 times, I don't even know how many times, 15 times a day by a little alien that wants to suck the life out of you. Like, you try and live with that. So look, we're getting formula and we're feeding this child formula because I can't deal with this. Like, you maybe thought it, but you just couldn't say it. Well, that's okay. And so that's the grace and forgiveness we have for ourselves and have for everybody. That allows the anger and resentment to go away. And the final step is this. We change our beliefs. Now that we're in truth and reality, that we all created a false persona. This is worst day cycle stuff. This is adapted wounded child. Now that we're all in reality of, wow, my belief about having to be nice and don't hurt others is a false belief. It's part of my false persona. I have to move into step 7, and I have to acknowledge my belief system is causing me problems. This niceness, or whatever it may be, whatever belief system you uncover, that's our responsibility, and we are not to blame. It was a survival mechanism we had to adapt or adopt to get through childhood, but now as an adult, I am responsible for becoming aware of it and putting a plan in place to address it and change it. And so that's what I'm going to do. I need to change these beliefs. So I recognize how these beliefs are false and that they set up my playing the victim and my own self-victimization. That if I hold on to this belief that I have to be nice and can't hurt others, I am choosing to be the author of my own self-victimization. I am giving permission to be mistreated by others. That's not on them. That's on me. So I put a plan in place to become an expert in developing these new beliefs and actions. Now, how do I do that? Well, go to my YouTube channel, the Codependence playlist. I have, I think it's, the list is growing, but they all start off with codependence recovery. The first one you're going to want to watch is Understanding Morals and Values. This is going to allow you to start creating your own North Star, because you had to develop mom and dad's beliefs, like this client, that I have to be nice, that if I ever do anything or say or think or do anything that might disagree with them, I'm hurting them, therefore I'm a bad person. That's the belief she had, which is completely irrational. But for her, like, and this is not easy. She's like, oh, I feel so bad. Yeah, and that's what I told her. I was like, that's right where I want you to feel. I want you to feel bad, because you'll have to break through that discomfort till you get into reality that actually what you're doing is bad. Because do you see all this anger and resentment and those comments you make to your husband? Is that nice? No. And why do you do that? It's because you're holding on to this false belief. And the reason it's false is because the anger and resentment comes out. That's the proof. That's the proof your belief system is faulty. And it's working against you. And it's setting you up for your own victimization. And because you also victimize yourself when you go against your moral and value and you say those sarcastic comments. That's why we have to do this work. Okay? So there you go. There's your 7-step process. If you like this content, please just click that little like button, share it with others you think this might help. And as always, leave me your comments. And finally, enjoy the journey.